And with that, good evening. Let me know if you can see and hear everything okay, you guys in the chat room. Getting started just a couple of minutes early, just to make sure the technical issues are dealt with right up front. And welcome Doug Diamond from Diamond Digital Media, back home from the weekend conference and visiting with family. Thank you for keeping the wheels on patch air on the aircraft so we can taxi out and go to 40,000 feet. So, all right. Thank you, Susan. Outstanding. Thank you, Eileen. Eileen loves being quick on the draw. We have a Western theme this evening, even though we are going to cover my science fiction novel, 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, published first in 2014 and then second release in 2016. Kind of thought we'd do story time tonight, but there is a very brief chapter in this book entitled the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So that's why I was picking up a little of the Clint Eastwood Western movie theme music for tonight because of that. But it occurred to me, if we took a science fiction novel and it was made into a movie, which would be great, in my humble hubristic opinion, and we took the theme music from a couple of the spaghetti westerns and overlaid them into a science fiction genre, a juxtaposition of the two. Might be an interesting mix. I really enjoy that music. I think it finally won an Academy Award, some of that. Anyway, without belaboring the point, welcome to the first time in any of the live streams that I have done, and along with my wife Kathleen, who, by the way, won't be joining us tonight, maybe in chat room a little later, but I've never read excerpts from my book. And I had put out the request on Sunday's live stream for you as patrons to let me know what you would like me to talk about tonight on the Wednesday night live stream. And been several people who have said that they don't have time to read a book, or they have eyesight issues or whatnot. But is there an MP3? Is there a book on tape, so to speak? Is there an audio version? And over the years I have had requests for the audio version. So I thought, well, why don't we try doing that? I'm not one who would be reading books for books on tape, book on audio, book on MP3. I'll do my best tonight. I do read a lot of articles for you in the normal course of our live streams, but I'm not very good at doing multiple voices, multiple characters as I'm reading, so if you'll bear with me, what I'd like to do is to be able to demonstrate tonight, and I'm sure it'll run over into tomorrow. It might even run over into Sunday to complete this book. But I wanted an opportunity to share the technology, which is typical in a science fiction novel. A lot of future cast, a lot of extrapolation of current technology into future applications, and I've done that in this book. And as I've shared with you both today with several articles and research papers, and I've shared with you in the past in live streams, that the scientific community kind of is catching up to the things that I published first in Covert Catastrophe, the first novel, in 2013, followed on in 2014 by 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, especially with regard to nanodiamond technology is catching up, and certainly quantum computing is catching up to, we could call them prognostications as a writer, as a novelist, putting forth that future vision. And many of you have appreciated the articles that I have sent that have said, hey, this was in the book, this was in the book, this was in the book. So let's cover the book. So many of you like to sit back, relax, not even watch the live stream, and just play this in the background. Tonight is an ideal time for that because it's just story time. I will be putting up some graphics that illustrate aspects, technology, scenes in the novel. But one thing I want to start with, I presented back in 2017 when I was broadcasting on Truth Frequency Radio. I had my own program on Friday nights for a couple of hours each night. And there was a story that came out of the British Royal Navy, of all places. And that's where I want to begin before I really start reading excerpts from them. Well, we're going to start at the beginning. We're not going to do excerpts. We're going to read the book. So let me jump over to something that I did send to you earlier. And then we will do Ezekiel chapter 3. And as always, I need to find my little deal here. Okay. Scrolling through my emails, which is my note system. And we will start with the design of my submarine that I've sent to you. This was on August 30th of 2017. The Royal Navy unveils fish-like submarine concepts. So if you want to take a look at that, if you haven't already, there are many articles published about this topic. I'll just take this one that is from Marine Technology News. Royal Navy unveils fish-like submarine concepts. A crewed mothership, that's crude, not it's C-R-E-W-E-E-D, okay? Crewed mothership shaped like a manta ray. Unmanned eel-like vessels equipped with sensor pods which dissolve on demand to avoid enemy detection, etc., etc., etc. Hollywood for the next sci-fi blockbuster. Sounds like something for a Hollywood blockbuster, they say here. And challenged to imagine what a future submarine would look like and how it would be used to keep Britain safe in decades to come, the UK's brightest and most talented young engineers and scientists went to work for the Royal Navy's Nautilus 100 project, set up to mark the 100th anniversary of the launch of the world's first nuclear-powered submarine, USS Nautilus. Okay? Let's skip down here. They're talking about most advanced submarine and applied technologies. The whale shark manta ray shaped mothership would be built from super strong alloys and acrylics with surfaces which can morph and shape with hybrid algae, electric, cruising power, and propulsion technologies, including tunnel drives, which work similarly to a Dyson bladeless fan. The submarine could travel at speeds up to 150 knots. This mothership would also be capable of launching unmanned underwater vehicles shaped like eels, etc., etc. These remarkable designs display the great promise of our young engineers and scientists and the great ambition of the Royal Navy, said UK Defence Minister Harriet Baldwin. Okay. Somebody read 2048 Diamonds in the Rough and submitted my manta ray, which I will show as a close-up. You see my manta ray. It's just below my 600-cell tetrahedron quantum computer, which we will discuss a little bit tonight. But the manta ray is the focus. How do you come up with a manta ray design unless you read it somewhere else? And what I just read to you about the morphing of the shape, it has flexible wings so that it can swim in the water, it can launch out of the water, it can go up to several hundred feet and return, just like a manta ray does when they're going through feeding and breeding. They launch out of the water. The material of the submarine for the hull is certainly high-tech. It's nanodiamond material. So we'll kind of go through the submarine, but I call it Steve, after Steve Irwin, the late naturalist from television. Everyone knows from all of his exuberance and working with animals and his untimely and horrible death, really, receiving a spike into the chest, into the heart from a ray. So I thought it was appropriate to dedicate the submarine, which, if you've read the book, you know that I have an artificial intelligence in the submarine by way of a quantum computer, a 6-foot diameter spherical 600-cell quantum computer on board the submarine, which is sentient. And the crew interact with this, much like with Star Trek and other sci-fi spaceship situations. The crew interact with the submarine, calling him by the first name of Steve. Okay? So that's a quick overview. I was pleasantly surprised to see that the UK awarded their gold prize, their first prize, in the design competition to my submarine. Okay, I am going to be a little full of myself tonight because I'm the author of the book. So I'm being self-promotional right up front. I think it's a pretty cool design. Anyway, let's go to Ezekiel. That's my opening monologue. Our opening scripture for this evening, I will put up on the screen again here. It's a little slow. There we are. Ezekiel chapter 3, verse 9. I will make your forehead like a diamond, harder than flint. Do not be afraid of them or dismayed at their presence, even though they are a rebellious house. Now, did you ever think you would find diamonds in the Bible? Certainly there are various translations of the word. Most of the time the scriptures simply use the word flint or hard as a rock. But this particular translation has this as diamond. Let's put it in context. This is Ezekiel, and Ezekiel eats the scroll. Son of man, he said to me, eat what you find here. Eat this scroll, then go and speak to the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he fed me the scroll. Son of man, he said, eat and fill your stomach with this scroll I am giving you. So I ate, and it was as sweet as honey in my mouth. Then he said to me, Son of man, go now to the house of Israel and speak my words to them. For you are not being sent to a people of unfamiliar speech or difficult language, but to the house of Israel, not to the many peoples of unfamiliar speech and difficult language, whose words you cannot understand. Surely if I had sent you to them, they would have listened to you. But the house of Israel will be unwilling to listen to you, since they are unwilling to listen to me. For the whole house of Israel is hard-headed and hard-hearted. Behold, I will make your face as hard as their faces, and your forehead as hard as their foreheads. I will make your forehead like a diamond, harder than flint. Do not be afraid of them or dismayed at their presence, even though they are a rebellious house. So I offer that to you, not only because of the reference to diamond, but because we talk about 5G and the prefrontal cortex, okay? Full armor of God, helmet of salvation, tying these together. And let's tie it together as well with Israel and their election. The latest result that I sent to you just before the live stream is from Haaretz News. Israel election results. Netanyahu will pull out all the stops, including military action, to hold on to power. Israelis voted to save their democracy, but the country may soon face a severe constitutional crisis if Netanyahu, facing political failure and criminal prosecution, adopts Nixon-style desperate measures. So you can read that at Haaretz News. Just came out before the live stream. Take a look at that. I won't say much about Israel in this live stream. Let's wait till the actual final results come out tomorrow, and then we'll probably have some comment on that at the beginning of tomorrow's live stream. Alrighty. I'm going to run through some graphics real quickly for those of you that are laying down on the couch and aren't watching the screen. I'm just going to put up some things that you can keep in mind as I go through reading the book. We see the 600 cell tetrahedron. There's an active GIF here that shows it in representation that looks like the image that I have on the cover of the book itself. Then we have an example of the manta ray. My first novel, Covert Catastrophe, is pictured here. This is the Advanced Light Source building that houses their synchrotron that overlooks the San Francisco Bay, where that novel opens and figures prominently. And next to that is an image of Markarian 421, the brightest burster gamma ray source that's ever been Earth directed and recorded in human history. That's how Covert Catastrophe opens, with Markarian 421. So I just wanted to show you an image of what that looks like. Next, this is what is known as a Kapahaka fern. This is the heart of the submarine. Steve, it is fractal. Let me enlarge that for you. This is a fractal design, meaning that the larger replicates itself infinitely towards the center. In the novel, this is the heart that pumps green blood, because the submarine's power source is derived from multiple sources. It operates with green blood and photosynthesis and has an unlimited fractal pumping capacity by way of this design that copies the fern. Let's call it fernomorphic, if you will. Okay, so that's the design of the heart. In addition to photosynthesis, the submarine also derives power from the sun and power from seawater, and it provides oxygen to the crew by synthesizing that from seawater as well. And back in 2014, it had something called the Higgs drive. Okay, that's in reference to the Higgs boson and the Higgs field, both of which, primarily the Higgs field, the submarine takes advantage of. So a mixture of things, a mixture of technologies. In the beginning of 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, there's another submarine, not really a submarine per se, but another vessel that is highlighted to give some historical background. This is an actual vessel. It was called a Sea Shadow, and it was the first U.S. Navy stealth ship. It was built in the San Francisco Bay, built in Lockheed. I'm showing you an image of Treasure Island, which is right next to the San Francisco Bay Bridge as you go into San Francisco, and anchored there at the dock there is the HMB-1, which is pictured to the right in a larger image. That is the Hughes mining barge. This was used to construct and house this stealth ship built by Lockheed at the south end of the San Francisco Bay to hide it from satellite surveillance. And it operated at night until they completed all of their testing. Then they brought it out. It was very public. They brought it out in the daylight and showed it off. This is part of where the book begins to start. It also makes reference with the Hughes mining barge, which has a sliding roof that moves back. In the storyline, I give the accurate historical account of the raising of a raising of part of a Russian submarine in the Pacific in an attempt to recover its codes, its code books, code machines, and nuclear warheads at the time. This was all part of the Glomar Explorer and the Hughes mining barge and a lifting apparatus called Clementine. And the Glomar Explorer was supposed to be a mining ship, mining manganese nodules on the seabed was the cover story. So all of that is related in the book as well. So I weave in a lot of historical fact and documentation into the novel itself, but in a brief way. I don't belabor the point. Again, here's some images of the actual Sea Shadow and the interior of the Hughes mining barge. So those play The Hughes mining barge itself, not so much the Sea Shadow. The Sea Shadow is just at the beginning of the book. But the Hughes mining barge goes to the island of Cyprus in the Mediterranean, just off the coast of Syria and Israel. So what I offer to you is a look at Cyprus in the Mediterranean on this map. And I would offer to you this. Cyprus is in a very strategic position militarily. Between Israel and Cyprus offshore is the largest natural gas deposit in the world, known as the Leviathan gas fields. In the Golan Heights to the north end of Israel is the source of all oil. Think of it as a well, if you will. The source of all the oil in the entire Middle East, and this was only discovered and acknowledged a little over a year ago, is in the Golan. So you can see why there's a lot of contention for that area. But Cyprus itself, if you were going to launch a military operation and coordinate it, would be a great place to do that. So that is in the book. Here's Cyprus itself. Turkey controls, let's call it the northeastern end, the upper half. They control that. There's a demilitarized zone that the UN controls that divides the island, and the southern is controlled by the Cypriots, and down in the south end, Russia has a very much enlarged naval presence of a naval port that the Cypriots have allowed the Russians to occupy and to expand in the last couple of years. Again, very strategic location. The British, since just about World War II, on Mount Olympus, yes, there's a Mount Olympus on Cyprus, have a radar installation. And there is quite a bit of drama that takes place at this location in the book. Okay, so I'm using factual locations in the storyline and technologies. You can see the geodesic spheres here, look just like my 600 cell tetrahedron. There are radar domes inside. These are weather protection. It snows up here. In fact, there's a ski resort, a ski lift right up here as well. This is where a major battle takes place in the storyline. Inside the submarine, these are not obviously my renditions. I'm borrowing from some artists just to give you kind of an idea of what the inside of Steve, the manta ray submarine, might look like. So I'll just scan through these fairly quickly for you, just to give you an idea, kind of my vision of what the inside would look like. Holographic screens is the idea here. And I'm not going to spoil the book for you. We'll read through this. But there's something unique about the crew of this submarine. Again, just to kind of give you a flavor for what it might look like in there if we were to have a movie produced from the novel. This is what I would consider to be the quantum computer within the submarine itself. Now, it's bigger than 6 feet in diameter, but it gives you the general idea of a compartment that would hold the sentient quantum computer in the sub. Here's, again, the quantum computer as a hologram. This would be Steve, the voice of the submarine. This is the sick bay, and there's some action that takes place in there. Again, another image of Steve and possibly interacting with the crew on the bridge. Let's see, let's get over to the next one. And in the book we have a map that is projected. Behind the command chairs, there are 3 command chairs side by side, and behind them is a holographic map of the island of Cyprus and Mount Olympus itself, with the British radar installation at the top. And they use this holographic interactive 3D map as a way to plan their actions, forthcoming actions on the island of Cyprus. Alrighty. And there I was talking about, back on Truth Frequency Radio, about the AI and Universal Computer, my 600 cell tetrahedron. Alrighty, so that's the backdrop. We'll go ahead and get into the book. There are a couple of other articles that I sent to you on some technology. One of the things that factors into this novel is the new oxygen hoarding crystal is the future of breathing underwater. Just a bucket of this stuff can steal all the oxygen in a room. Now this is actual research, and I shared that article with you, so you can look at that later. Oxygen crystals are in the storyline. In Covert Catastrophe, the first novel, I sent you this article about hydrogen sulfide, surviving blood loss using hydrogen sulfide. So for trauma victims, reduced metabolic activity improves outcome in many clinical and experimental models of injury and diseases that result in insufficient blood supply. Recently, we demonstrated that inhaled hydrogen sulfide gas can be used to reversibly reduce metabolic activity in mice. We hypothesize that hydrogen sulfide will confer benefit in injuries and diseases related to insufficient blood supply. So I factor that into Covert Catastrophe at the very early stages of that book line. So if that piques your interest, there's some stuff to read. Okay? All right. Without further ado, I will go ahead, and I think what we'll do is we'll just put this image up here while I begin the reading. Thank you for joining me this evening. Do the best I can to be entertaining in the method of reading this book to you. We're beginning with, and Doug, if you feel that it's appropriate to edit this, because this reading will go out as a public YouTube video, if you want to edit this at this point and make this the beginning, that's your prerogative. Whatever you feel is appropriate, Doug. You manage the editing chores for me. So again, the book we're reading is 2048 Diamonds in the Rough. I first published this in 2014, and here we are. Chapter 1, New Beginnings. Now this is a follow-on to Covert Catastrophe, so we pick up the story. You sure about this? Paul, fully aware that what Jim's answer would be. Absolutely, wincing at the pain, the steel healing ribs reminding Jim not to forcefully speak. Been only a few days since Dr. Minton let you out of the hospital, Paul offering a hand as Jim eased himself out of the passenger side of his friend's Humvee. You're beginning to sound a lot like Laura, you know, Jim looking up from the seat, using the bare metal door to steady himself. Nothing like how she's going to complain on your honeymoon, Paul laughing, but knowing the pain Jim was experiencing during his recovery from being dragged by a whirlpool beneath the Golden Gate Bridge. Her idea for us to get married right away, not mine, Jim slowly standing erect beside the former military vehicle. Didn't have to say yes, you know, Paul feigning anger. You ever tried saying no to her? Jim asking, taking a few first tentative steps toward the doors. Paul offering a hand, Jim waving him off with a knowing smile for his paramedic buddy of over 10 years now. The two entered the small white chapel before anyone had arrived early in the morning. On their drive over, Paul good-naturedly chided him about always being on time. Today, Jim was a couple of hours early to his own wedding. They used the time to pray and to go over what they'd all been through these past several days. Status check. Now, these are short sections in here, and I have headings on each one, so I'll give you the heading and then we'll move into the dialogue. Status check. George, Captain Richard Anderson, U.S. Navy SEAL, retired, began slowly easing the elderly physicist up out of his wheelchair. We need to talk. Glad to. With Richard's assistance, he swung his hips to one side, landing against the hospital-type bed set up in the living room of Jim's former apartment, not far from the campus of UC Berkeley. After settling George beneath the light blanket, Richard began while slowly pacing the room, Martha watching along with Lieutenant Casey seated nearby. Obviously, George, you're not going anywhere, Richard trying to be lighthearted. Except to heaven, George breaking into a wide, reassuring grin for the Navy SEAL captain. Of course. We need reinforcements if we are to proceed onward, Richard's voice taking on a military countenance. And upward, George's eyes sparkling with his flippant remark. The body may have taken its toll following their recent adventures in sabotaging the advanced light source's synchrotron and in infecting the ESNet 5 with George's proprietary quaternary programmed virus, the mind remaining sharp and ready to help. Yes, we need a larger team, a much larger, in fact, Richard looking over at his second in command. I recommend at least 100 this time, George retrieving a glass of water and straw from his nightstand. Yes, the logistical support alone requires it, Richard opening a small notepad and pen from his shirt pocket. And Jim, Martha interjecting, means cutting his honeymoon short, Richard giving her a smile. I'll make the call, Lieutenant Casey going for his cell phone. J&J. We're right here with you, Dr. Justine McIntosh on a Skype conference call with Dr. Judy Hillegas. Glad you agreed, Dr. Hillegas, to setting up shop at Stanford. Richard going over a report on a separate laptop alongside the one he was conferencing on. Not too popular at my old one, Judy laughing, referring to the Advanced Light Source building up on the hill overlooking the campus of UC Berkeley. The damage they'd all done to the synchrotron was substantial, requiring at least 2 years steady work to bring it back online. In the process, sealing Dr. Hillegas's professional fate. Not to worry, you two now are on my payroll, and I have deep pockets thanks to some well-placed connections, Judy and Justine both acknowledging what had several days prior been agreed to with Richard. How can we help, Justine knowing the science both can offer, but reaching out for the military side of their planning? We need civilian intel from local law enforcement. I can, of course, obtain it through our channels. I want law enforcement officers we can trust. We need eyes on targets and local security for this new team, Richard pausing for his expected reply from Justine. My fiancée from the Highway Patrol can take care of that for us, enthusiastically she tosses out. Fiancée now, is she? Since when? Judy slugging her friend's shoulder at their seated positions. Same day Laura insisted Jim marry her right away. Justine recovering. No time. Her tone moving from jovial to solemn. Sorry, Richard. Judy getting back to the business at hand, giving her friend another look. Good. The world. Markarian 421 in its largest ever recorded gamma-ray burst, weakened purely as a function of distance, performed exactly as scientists had expected. Nature's synchrotron energies, having met man's own minuscule blue beam from the synchrotron of the Berkeley Advanced Light Source, opened a rift. Having collided within the constellation Ursa Major, the Bear, the resulting tear in the fabric of the Higgs field allowed something to pass through. George had expected the result, as well the directly involved scientific community. Each withheld such vital information from the public at large. Now it was time to deal with it. The advanced light source purposefully had been erected overlooking the San Francisco Bay from high atop the hills of the UC Berkeley campus. Its single external aperture, its purpose at the time not understood by its builders, aligned perfectly with the pyramidal peak on the campus of Sather Tower. The blue beam shot from the synchrotron storage ring of the particle accelerator. Photons traveling near the speed of light continued out over the lighthouse of Alcatraz Island, pointing the way through the exact center of the cabled arches of the Golden Gate Bridge. The blazar Markarian 421 emitted its own blue beam of supraluminal gamma rays traveling at 6 times the speed of light. As well as being Earth-directed, it too was aimed for the exact point in space, Ursa Major. The Great Bear having provided both the University and the state of California with its mascot and state symbol. Sather Tower replicating the original obelisk from ancient Egypt, not unlike the Washington Monument and the one at the Vatican. It was not until modern times and the advent of the quantum computer that man was able to determine the exact moment in time and space when Markarian 421 would light up the heavens. Ordinarily, the event itself would have been sufficient, providing years of data to pore over. However, those in control of planet Earth sought more than even scientists themselves could have imagined. Trapped by their own narrow fields of study, thus lacking the spatial awareness necessary to see the bigger picture, coupled with their innate hubristic nature, none saw it coming. Since ancient times, moving through and past the heights of Egyptian culture, secret knowledge quietly acquired by succeeding generations of elite masters. Modern times have revealed the true associations and cloisters of the wealthy families and leaders of pagan religions. The true holders of embedded secrets remain hidden behind these public persona. Time. Is the silo operational, Jim enjoying Martha's home cooking in his former apartment? Yes, Michael and Jesse report all is well below, Oklahoma. George softly blowing on his hot soup. That derecho and earthquake series flattened most of the cities. Sorry to cut your honeymoon short. It will never end, Laura kissing Jim on the cheek, setting a plate of sandwiches before the gathered men. George giving them both an appreciative nod and smile, Jim pulling her into his lap. Time really is short, isn't it, George? Laura looking into Jim's eyes. As it says in Scripture, the birth pangs are getting closer together. George squirming uncomfortably in his bed. Their intensity growing stronger each day as evidenced by the increased movements within the planet. It's not all due to the gamma rays, is it? Lieutenant Casey finishing off half a roast beef sandwich. I thought they'd winked out following the meetup in Ursa Major. Indeed they did, George mischievously giving him a wink back. Mostly, though, it has to do with the planet passing through the galactic center of the Milky Way. You're about to sound like a New Ager there, George, Martha adjusting his napkin, tucking it further into his sweater vest. That brought a polite chuckle from the small dining room, tightly packed with Navy SEALs. More to the immediate task at hand, George watching Martha's eyes before him, is the Higgs field. Is it still open? Jim easing Laura back to her feet. No, it remained open only for a few nanoseconds at most. A upon the impact of their blue beam. But it was enough. Revelation. I knew it, Dr. Henry Zimmer slamming a fist upon the workstation inside the security offices of the Advanced Light Source building. He'd been released from custody based upon the evidence provided by the digital recordings of the internal security cameras. His vision having fully recovered in a matter of 24 hours at Alta Bates Hospital. Dr. Keppel and those others, whoever they are, will pay, raging out the doors to his car. Closely followed on his heel, a few of his most trusted team. Who was the man responsible for spraying the magnets? Stepping forward, a young researcher offers. His name is Jim Sanderson, a paramedic working out of Oakland. That served to stop Dr. Zimmer cold. What? It doesn't add up. Frustration heaped upon anger. And I'm supposed to believe he alone had the wherewithal to achieve such an event as this? Flinging open his driver's door. Had to be that bitch, Judy Hilligus. She's the one responsible for blinding me with her boiling tea. We know, the young scientist's words cowering. The police are still searching for her. Well, they'd better add that medic to their list of suspects. Zimmer not quite ready to let go enough of his rage to enter the automobile. Person of interest, I believe the police are calling him. Another young scientist corrects his superior. Zimmer only menacingly glares at him, finally dropping onto the car seat, slamming the door so hard the gathering, expecting its glass to shatter. New agenda. Judy, Dr. Justine McIntosh, entering her own Stanford lab office. Hold on a sec. Dr. Hilligus not turning from the monitor in her Skype call. Justine reaching over her friend's shoulder, abruptly hitting the power button on the laptop. Sorry, gotta go, gal. Another crisis, I suppose, half-heartedly rising from her swiveled chair at a workstation. Nothing but, these days, Justine tossing her a windbreaker. Raining again. Beginning to resemble Noah's flood around here, you know. Judy pulling it on as they moved toward the open door. As in the days of Noah, Justine following her through to the empty hallway. Hardly daylight. It's past 3 a.m., you know. Judy moving along now at a trot. We have a meeting to get to. Justine pulling out the keys to her new SUV provided by her fiancé, the California Highway Patrol captain. Onward, my dear. Judy managing a laugh as she holds the outer door leading to the nearby vehicle. What the heck? Judy slamming her door against the downpour. What kind of truck is this? Undercover. Justine firing up the powerful engine. And supercharged. Exactly what you need. Emergency lights and power. Judy examining the interior. And a siren. Justine momentarily activating it in the empty parking lot. Cool. No more tickets for you, I suppose. Judy tightening her seatbelt. Where to? A group of guys I'd like you to meet. Justine nearly firewalling the throttle, sending the SUV into a controlled drift across the open lot and through the narrow security gate. Gathering. The church bells throughout Berkeley seemingly rang in unison early Sunday morning. Jim, of course, was wheeling Richard and several of his fellow SEALs, now that he'd been officially adopted aboard, to the preordained meetup. Two more of their plain white SUVs following in close formation. Their destination? Tilden Regional Park, in the site of a former Nike Hercules missile battery overlooking the San Francisco Bay. Above ground, to the casual observer, it was nothing more than a concrete, well-covered pad. And like George and Martha's Oklahoma farmhouse, it was what lay below ground that counted. Unlike the silo, the site was an empty concrete shell, not more than several small box-like rooms, 20 feet below grade. For their purposes, that cold, rainy morning, it was perfect. Arriving in quiet succession, each driver, including Jim, parked camouflaged beneath the large eucalyptus trees surrounding the hilltop venue. Once completed, the team made entry past the rusted padlock, securing the former man door to their new meeting space. Jim remaining topside, preparing a hidden parking spot for Justine and Judy. 15 minutes later, everyone was gathered into a standing circle, facing several battery-powered lanterns illuminating photographs and maps. Captain Richard Anderson, U.S. Navy SEAL Team 7, retired leader, began. Priority 1, locate the 2048 AI adiabatic quantum computer. It is the first of its kind. The others, like the 512 we took out at Alcatraz, are soon to be linked up. Gentlemen and ladies, I needn't tell you, they're hard at work recreating a new network. As Dr. Keppel outlined, they won't bother with another fiber optic layout as per the ESNet 5. Dr. Keppel's quaternary language-based virus having eventually destroyed that one. And thanks to our intrepid lady doctors, Judy and Justine. Hunting party. Richard continuing the briefing. We now have a full complement of personnel. Not far from here in Vallejo is the former Mare Island Naval Shipyard. It used to be the top home port for the most sophisticated subs in the Pacific Fleet. It's our new FOB. Richard pointing out the forward operating base on one of the several satellite reconnaissance photos. All personnel are to stagger their arrival times. Meetup is inside building J4, here near Pier 3. Richard kneeling down, pointing. Deadline, 0600 tomorrow, LT. Lieutenant Don Casey taking his cue. Transport nothing new for us. For our civilians, they'll be out of their element buddy system for this hunt. Once back on dry land, everyone should be up to speed. Jim interjecting, what type of transport? The lieutenant enjoying the question. 2 vessels. One a sub, the other, well, I'll let that one be a surprise. Don enjoying the break in tension. Adiabatic. Q Corporation was hard at work linking up the 1024 adiabatic quantum computers located in 10 nations of the world. Their main goal was that of establishing a network tied to their 2048 model, the only one of its kind and soon to be possessed of artificial intelligence, or AI. In comparison, the 512 models were akin to the old tech dummy terminals of the gate model transistor era. Such was the nature of advancing processing power. Only this time, the builders of this new generation hadn't fully grasped the magnitude of their creation. Even so, the now lowly 512 could reach across into another dimension, inserting a programmed problem. In return, receiving back not only a solution, perfect and accurate to the 99.99% percentile, but more energy than they'd input, typically 110% of it. Alone, the 2048 had the equivalent computational power of all human brains presently alive on the planet. Once networked, simultaneously, it would track each one of them. Its AI enabling it to control every person and to set in motion an agenda of its own. New order. Dr. Keppel, Jim began over the secured net they'd established aboard the submarine, silently passing along the bottom of the San Francisco Bay and out through the Golden Gate. Here, George adjusting the screen of the mil-spec laptop while sitting up in bed. Mary leaning in close to snuggle, Laura and her parents seated on a nearby couch. For my benefit, please describe this new network, Jim switching on the larger monitor beside the sub's mess room, equipped with nothing much more than a microwave oven. Lacking surplus bunks for passengers, the mess had become their quarters for the duration of the mission, and a briefing room for the gathered subcrew. Certainly, I'm confident each one of you are familiar with the aerosolized chemical spraying, or chemtrails, of the planet's atmosphere. It now contains sufficient quantities of aluminum, barium, strontium, and such that virtual and error-free signals will be transmitted between these 11 adiabatic computers. We can't do much about the atmosphere, too far along, I'm afraid, but we can go after the brains of their operation. It's a computer that can think for itself, Martha indicating to George that he stopped for a moment. We've questions, of course, Jim asked, almost laughing. For the seriousness of their mission quickly shifting, I take it our mission first is to locate this main computer and then take it out. Yes, George keeping to the point. Network. Continuing, Jim asked George, when will you arrive back at the site in Oklahoma? Approximately 48 hours. We still need to take precautions in our travels. Jim pressing, knowing that they must keep their transmissions brief. And your new form of communications? Still about 24 hours following arrival, as you'd previously estimated? Yes, afraid so. It can't be helped. The silo team is competent, but this is new for all of us. It's never been attempted before now, George sharing a knowing look with Martha, she concerned for his health and the strain traveling will place upon her elderly husband. Richard moving in closer to the conference microphone centered on the mess table. Next transmission will be from you, George, via your new system. Until then, this sub is going dark. With that, all signals emanating from the sub were shut down. Rendezvous. Running dark, thus silent, the sub meets a surface vessel exactly on time and location, 22 miles from the Golden Gate Bridge, alongside the Farallon Islands. Cleverly, their sub-driver utilized the numerous remains of scuttled cargo ships and worn tugs, coupled with hundreds of old barrels leaking radioactive waste products from the production of nuclear warheads and their associated research activities, all serving to scramble sonar, LiDAR, and satellite tracking signals. The ship is Sea Shadow, formerly a proof of concept in stealth technologies. It was built in Swath, small waterplane area twin hull configuration at Lockheed's Redwood City facilities inside the Hughes mining barge -1, a floating dry dock. Never commissioned and due for scrapping in June of 2012, publicly it was again placed inside the HMB-1 and moored in Alameda. The barge and sub were purchased from the General Services Administration as scrap, the terms of the sale requiring the dismantling of the Sea Shadow. Mysteriously, another barge appeared one day in the San Francisco Bay, tied to a pier at Treasure Island. Atop it were stacked what looked to be quantities of shipping containers. Remaining in place for several months, the media clamoring with theories as to its purpose, work continued within the shrouded confines of the containers, but only after dark. Seldom seen, workers also moved items into the barge dockside Hangar 3. Soon thereafter, the HMB-1 also tied up opposite the container barge at Treasure Island, its interior hold, or well, matching exactly the external dimensions of this container barge. Prior, Sea Shadow had been purchased and moved for scrapping from out of the well inside HMB-1, or so the cover story went. It was, in fact, acquired by one of George's shell corporations and dismantled into recoverable sections. Meanwhile, the container barge was moved by tug up the Sacramento River to Stockton, California, the HMB-1 remaining empty for a time. Now the newly constructed Sea Shadow met with a conventional Navy sub out of Mare Island at the Farallon Islands. Meanwhile, the HMB-1 was nearing the halfway point in its journey to the Mediterranean Sea. Within its well, the container barge 00100, owned by Google. Shell game. Lieutenant, open the sail hatch, Captain Richard Anderson, amused by what lay topside. Aye, aye, sir, Lieutenant Don Casey, like a kid opening his Christmas present. Jim and the remaining members of their 12-man team not informed of this stage of their mission. It was something George had cooked up for them. Only a small amount of seawater dribbled down the tubular hatchway, the cracking of the pressurized hull allowing most to be blown outward, the hiss echoing as if inside a vast and darkened chamber. Jim caught a bit of the salty sea across the chest of his black t-shirt and pants. The cold it brought a welcome relief from the heat of the partially submerged boat. Hatch secured, Don calling down. Going topside. Exiting through the towering sail portion of their sub to the bridge deck, a regular member of the sub's crew activating a series of powerful floodlights. Don lets out a long and piercing whistle from beneath his teeth. Climbing the ladder, Richard shaking his head, a broad smile evidenced toward Jim. Jim, close on his heels, is confused. Boarding party on deck, Richard issuing a final order before disappearing into the piercing lights from above. Regular crew remaining at their assigned stations. Jim's head popping out, expecting to see ocean and the rocks of Farallon. There was water, all right. At first, though, you cannot see the Pacific. Welcome to the Sea Shadow, a voice echoing from a loud hailer mounted only a few feet above their heads. In concert, a small horizontal hatch swings down, a ladder extending to just beyond their bridge deck. Come aboard. With the seas calm and the sub's antenna retracted, its sail only just clearing the flat black, horizontal, carbon fiber structure hovering over it. Expeditiously, Jim and the SEALs scrambled up the boarding ladder, the hatch once more silently secured behind the last man. Welcome aboard, Captain Anderson, a young man in his mid-20s offering the salute of a civilian. I'm Nick Jameson, part of Dr. Keppel's group. Returning the salute. Thank you, Mr. Jameson. My team is at your disposal. Richard and the other SEALs moving uneasily within the tight compartment, attempting to find a suitable place to stand. This vessel is designed for a crew of 12. Your team makes it 16. However, we'll manage. Within the hour, you are moving to another vessel. Now, if you will, secure yourselves. Heavy weather building, and we need to detach from that sub. Moments later, the twin-hulled surface vessel lurches upward, nosing over as the larger sub separates, dropping into the radiation-filled depths off the Golden Gate. Regaining its balance, Sea Shadow moves to full speed, twin screws propelling its pontoon structure forward into the rising seas, designed so as the hulls remain submerged, allowing them to ride beneath the waves. Attached to a thin profile superstructure intended to knife through surface waters, the craft met with little resistance, racing into the building Pacific Hurricane. Deriving its name from both shape and materials, she was built as a stealth ship, faceted unlike any before her. Radar returns reveal little more than the waves presently she sliced through at better than 30 knots. Mr. Jameson, Captain Anderson began. Nick, please, Captain. My crew and I are civilians. I realize you have many questions. Go on. We can multitask pretty well here. Each of the four men busying themselves at the high-tech control stations. Very well, Nick. First, tell us about this other vessel. I take it you will not be ferrying us to Cyprus. Silo. How's the link coming along? George entering the main control room 700 feet beneath their clandestine Oklahoma farmhouse. Michael and Jesse, having been up all night working in conjunction with their other like-minded members of their loose-knit organization around the globe. The first test signal will activate within the hour, Michael offering a seat to the elderly physicist. Jesse handing him a tablet displaying a graphical cross-sectional representation of the Earth's mantle. Excellent. And our boys? George sweeping a finger, moving the images across the screen. All is well. Brent switching to the larger of the three main monitors to a tracking map. ETA to rendezvous, 4 hours. And the team here? George laying the tablet atop his workstation. Jesse taking over. Arrived at 0200. Take them to assemble on level 6 at 0800. Nice work. Get some sleep yourselves. I'll make sure you're here for the show. The monitors. Doctors Justine McIntosh and Judy Hilligus, having found refuge with Laura at her parents' home in the Berkeley Hills overlooking the San Francisco Bay, were completing the final installation. Enjoying their clandestine borrowing of equipment from Justine's Stanford labs, facilitated by her fiancé, the California Highway Patrol captain. George scheduled the test for 9 a.m. We'll be ready, Justine reassuring her best friend, Judy. Brilliant move on his part, using the crack in the base of the Memorial Stadium to access the Hayward Fault, Judy enjoying their actions like two kids about to begin a snowball fight against others in the neighborhood. And thanks to the '89 Loma Prieta earthquake for further expansion of it, Justine making a final connection to an elaborate antenna array. How long will it remain on the roof? Someone's bound to report it, Laura entering the house accompanied by her father, Hank. We can pull it down right after we direct the burst at the receiving unit embedded in the fault. Judy almost giddy in anticipation. If I didn't know better, Hank openly laughing along with the three ladies, I think you were deliberately trying to set off an earthquake with all that stuff. Dad, you've watched too many James Bond movies. Laura accepting a plate of sandwiches from her mother. Enemy formation. Dr. Zimmer, the younger physicist timidly gaining his attention. What? Wheeling and looking over his shoulder. Sorry, but it's CERN on Skype. The young man backing away as if retreating from an advancing leopard. Why don't they use the secure net? Never mind. Get the hell out. Slamming the door, rattling photos and framed diplomas upon the walls of his office within the Advanced Light Source building. Moving to one of the many monitors, Ernst Zimmer radically changes his tone as he views several picture-in-picture images of his colleagues at the Large Hadron Collider. Good day, my friends, as if performing a soliloquy in his own grand theater. Good evening, Dr. Rachel Wilson immediately correcting him, illuminating for the gathered scientists Ernst's egocentrism. Whatever. And just what is it now? Busying himself, not bothering with again showing his face, mentally yelling, bitch. You know full well you have an 0900 Pacific Standard Time deadline, came her ominous retort. Looking up at the webcam, for a split second he imagined actual droplets of blood at the corners of her mouth. After all, railing inside at her pious face, it was his particle accelerator that was chosen for first contact. It wasn't his fault some nut of a medic sabotaged it. Complete. And you? Are you ready? letting his voice go menacingly thin yet sharp in its finality. Of course, Dr. Wilson, smug. New toy. Cape Flattery Lighthouse coming abreast to starboard, their navigator reporting. Helm. Thread her into that cove as planned. Their leader for the duration of this part of their journey, Nick Jameson, calmly directs another of the young men. Still pretty rough going, Richard observes. Not as bad as the Aleutians will be. ETA to the dock 0900 providing a toothy, all-too-young grin to the veteran SEAL captain. The storm only worsening throughout their sail north along the treacherous Pacific coastline, Sea Shadow taking it all in stride, like a thoroughbred ignoring its racing competitors. Richard was duly impressed, both by the young crewmen and their steed. Perhaps finally the oceans had indeed been conquered. Testing 1, 2. The days and nights following the collision between the Blazar Macquarie and 421 and the blue accelerated particle beam emanating from the synchrotron housed within the Advanced Light Source building at UC Berkeley fell into a state of relative calm before the proverbial storm. With the destruction of the Model 512 adiabatic quantum computer installed within the prison bowels on Alcatraz Island, the worldwide ESNet 5 system suffered a cascading collapse upon itself, helped along by George's quaternary programmed virus. The proverbial keeping all your eggs in one basket syndrome. At least Skype was up. Now, for the first time, two vastly different forms of communication were about to be tested, and as well, for vastly different intentions. The good. Ready when you are, Justine, George on an open Skype call from the deep underground silo labs. He had explained to all concerned the needless necessity of using a secure satellite phone. The NSA openly now was listening to everyone, everywhere. Some took a kind of comfort in knowing this. Only some. George, I won't ask you how you came by this information. All set here, Dr. McIntosh observing the data streaming over her laptop, displaying the latest energy levels transmitted by HARP. The bad. Good. I'm expecting over 4 billion watts impacting upon and heating the ionosphere. The ugly. Unfortunately, at 0900 it will be reflected back down upon Japan. Can we do anything to warm them? Judy coming online alongside Justine inside Laura's family home. No, no one would believe us. They've advanced their agenda too far along. All we can do is take full advantage of this opportunity. Crack house. You're going to need a small army this time, Jim had told Paul prior to leaving on the Sea Shadow. And we both know where to build one, Paul laughing at the pure irony of what they proposed to Richard. Equally enjoying the idea, he'd given them his blessing of approval. Paul and now his full-time paramedic partner Bill were en route to the area of 98th and Eads Avenues, deep into East Oakland. Notorious for crack gangs, quickly they pulled their ambulance up in front of one of the worst locations. Within minutes, a small knot of gangbangers had encircled them. Not menacing, only curious what the two tall white boys wanted, not hearing a siren or seeing their emergency lights on. Following their explanation of the planned operation, Paul and Bill found themselves being treated like long-lost brothers. The dealers couldn't wait to exercise some payback to those up on the hill in Berkeley. After all, they considered it their patriotic duty. Z-Man. This will be a 20% run-up, Dr. Ernest Zimmer, in his best alpha male voice, commanded over Skype. Of course, Dr. Rachel Wilson dryly replied. Don't screw this up, you ape, imagining roundly smacking this pompous ass up the side of his head, as she knew so well from her childhood days in the backwater streets of London. Gakona targeting complete? Dr. Zimmer asking over Skype to a scientist within the Alaskan facility. Yes, all set here, came a somewhat trembling voice. Tokyo, you ready to receive? Yes, Dr. Zimmer, at a precisely 0900 your time. A perfunctory Japanese response was heard by all on the call. 20 seconds and counting, Zimmer leading a dramatic flare, reveling in their perceived attention, reveling in their perceived attention upon him. Shelter from the storm. Reminds me of the story about the captain of a destroyer arguing with the lighthouse operator, threatening him to yield right of way to his warship, Richard observed from the open hatchway atop the Sea Shadow. Don't worry, it's automated. No one here now. Steve enjoying their easing alongside the small dock nestled within the protective cove. After several minutes of securing the vessel, they receive a radio transmission in the clear. Again, not that it really mattered with the NSA's big ears. How's the haul? A voice mimicking that of a local salmon fisherman. Holds are full. At the docks, Sea Shadow's radio man replies. Be alongside you, 0930, came the hoarse voice. Throwing the switch. HARP operates by generating and transmitting in the atmosphere over 4 billion watts of electromagnetic energy. Targeting and heating the ionosphere, extremely low frequency and very low frequency radio waves are transmitted to opposite locations around the globe. Amongst its various uses is the triggering of earthquakes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Dr. Zimmer's voice having switched to deadpan, as even he is fully cognizant of the consequences as to their present actions. Touchdown. Congratulations, Dr. Zimmer. Dr. Rachel Wilson knowing, without their help, he'd never have been able to continue with his part of their mission, not without the use of his beloved little synchrotron at Berkeley. The Large Hadron Collider, comprising a multi-magnitude larger particle accelerated, awaited its real purpose in having been constructed by these men and women of science. The installation of new superconducting magnets, affording the generation of never-before-seen energies, excepting those from blazars, such as Markarian 421. Nature's own generator of synchrotron energy, or God's, depending on one's own beliefs and desires. Pass receiver. J&J, you getting this? George, knowing full well the two physicists, sitting with Laura, her father and mother, in the family home, were indeed noting the readings from the U.S. Geological Society. Oh, Lord, Laura's mother is heard by those within the Oklahoma Silos laboratory. At a length of, excuse me, okay. I'm going to take a short break here real quick. Just need to get a drink of water. Okay. Rendezvous. The two vessels arriving at near the same time off the coast of Washington State, a bit south of the U.S.-Canadian seaborne border. That tsunami will arrive in 6 hours, Captain. The captain of the Multi-Arrayed Nautical Transport Assembly, or MANTA, as it is affectionately known by her builders and crew, called upward from his own hatchway. Peering down through that same opening, through which not long ago he climbed aboard Sea Shadow, Captain Anderson was surprised by the other man's attire. Understood, Captain. The newly arrived vessel was itself literally a new form of submarine, both in operation and its shape. That of a manta ray, member of the shark family, included with its long tail and 2 dangerous-looking barbed structures. Its captain, climbing aboard Sea Shadow, Richard asks about its shape. Not strictly a manta ray, mate. His thick accent, that of an Aussie, smiling and laughing, taking in his new environ. Actually, more of a stingray, you might say. And say, what have we have here? Moving further into the cramped space. We can get into all that later, mate. Richard concerned about the mission ahead, but otherwise friendly. What's the name of your vessel? With all due respect, and I do mean this, the MV Irwin. Contact. All right, Justine yells out over their Skype connection with George and the others back at the silo. Got it, Michael calls back to her. George, amused by their youthful exuberance, the signal is propagating nicely through the Hayward fault line. I believe we can expect the same and more once our new computer gives it a go. George receiving handshakes from the much larger team now assembled around him. Time for a nap, Georgie boy. Martha slowly spinning him around in his chair. As always, you're right. Fellows and ladies, take over. Michael and Jesse, how long until your computer is ready for a complete test run? Judy watching the readings on their ELF display. 1,700 hours, I'd estimate, Michael answering, Jesse nodding in agreement. 5 o'clock, same as when that tsunami is due here, Justine countering. You aren't in any danger there, Jesse offering. Right. I think we have sufficient elevation to ride this one out. Judy appearing confident for Laura and her parents, standing behind them in their own living room. Hank looking up through the picture windows, trying to imagine what is coming their way. He'd seen the videos from the great tsunami which struck Japan on March 3rd of 2011. It too was caused by a magnitude 9 earthquake. And as far as this team was concerned, by energies likewise transmitted to the island by HARP. Time's up. Medics says he's been in there. The apparent leader of the small gang, quietly pointing down the curved hallway of the mezzanine level. Moving in 2 groups, each hugging along the polished white walls of the laboratory, not unlike maneuvers they'd pulled off against rival gangs. This time, however, it was not a battle for turf. As Paul and Bill had explained, this was for both their country and the world itself. What the hell are you doing in here? A young security guard attempting to unholster his semi-automatic pistol. At least the Department of Energy allowed them to be armed. Not much the Berkeley City Council or the university could say about that. It brought the groups to a halt, but not for long. One at the rear broke free, heading straight ahead, overpowering the guard. Knocked unconscious by a single blow, his attacker securing the weapon within his own waistband. The noise bringing employees through doorways into the mezzanine. Suddenly, a deafening panic alarm sounded through the expansive area. Chaos ensued in all but the streetwise gang members. Remaining flat against the walls, they allowed everyone to escape the building. Only one stubborn man refused to leave his office, Dr. Ernest Zimmerman. Somehow he sensed what was coming. Go time. Captain Anderson, we need to get underway. The Aussie about his same age and build. Right. What's your name? Richard motioning to his men to gather up their gear. Of course. William Bartholomew. My crew call me BB, disappearing down the hatch. Irwin was nestled beneath the twin pods of the black carbon fiber sea shadow, itself riding atop the expansive winged back of Irwin, matching the inky depths for which he was designed to roam. From the surface, both vessels nearly invisible to the naked eye in the stormy light of day. The last man aboard, a crew member, secures the overhead hatch, with each man feeling the dropping sensation as the two vessels detach. Irwin's crew allowing the craft to nose over into a free fall to 100 fathoms before leveling off. Like an express elevator, wouldn't you say, Captain? BB moving away from what Richard surmised to be a command station in the center of what he assumed to be the bridge of the strange vessel. Good description, BB. Richard releasing his grip on a stanchion of polished brass extending from deck to ceiling. You work for George? Right you are, mate, BB laughing through his best pirate captain imitation. But seriously, yes, as do you and your men here. Interesting organization he runs out of that silo, underground in the fields of Oklahoma. Sounds like you're up to speed. How about filling us in on the rest of the mission? I know our target. Not sure how George intends getting us all there is all. He left that up to you and me, my friend. He called you resourceful. And he also said his son would be along with you. BB scanning the group arrayed before him. Richard stepped aside a little, allowing BB a better view of Jim. Heard a lot about you. You sure know how to take a beating. Welcome aboard. BB shaking Jim's hand. Captive. Drag his lily white ass out of here's. The leader snaps off. With that, Dr. Zimmer is pulled kicking and screaming from the perceived sanctuary of his office space. A quick punch across his mouth ends his day at the sound of his weak jawbone fracturing upon impact. Already half the gang has exited back the way they came, to a parking lot filled with disbelieving scientists and their support staff. Not another word is spoken by any of the kidnappers. None were needed, as their escape went unhindered by the unarmed employees. Security officers were several minutes down the narrow winding road in the offices at the main gate. Two of the gang had taken the time to cut a hole in the base of the wire fencing. Dr. Zimmer's body unceremoniously was dragged through it, finally disappearing over the embankment edge, followed by the remaining members of this experienced gang. Como. 1800 hours we established communications with Silo, as George's lab had been so designated by BB. You do realize all forms of communications are monitored. Richard not quite sure what to make of the sub's commander. Judging by his clothing and demeanor, indeed he was civilian. Richard noting how his new colleague moved and handled himself. Body English spoke volumes as to a man's background and skill sets. Enjoying being a step ahead of the Navy SEAL captain, BB strung him along for a few moments more. Ah, me matey, getting itchy, are we? His ridiculous pirate rendition wearing thin on Richard. Cut the crap, Richard's tone flat, seemingly incapable of echoing off the sub's interior walls. Get to the briefing. Fair enough, you're right. We've got our work cut out for us, BB regaining his composure. First off, like I said, we established pre-scheduled commo with Silo. And how's that to be done? Richard moving in toward the man, not wanting to miss anything. Old George has, you might say, worked out a way for us to speak to the earth. BB still enjoying his place. Come again? Richard nearly now in his face projecting a false smile of his own. Through the earth would be more accurate, the young radio man explaining, feeling himself portraying the role of a boxing referee rising from his seat, inserting a shoulder between the two much larger men. They moved apart, allowing the explanation to take precedence. ELF waves are transmitted through the earth, following a complex series of fault lines in the earth's mantle. I like calling it TTMC, for through the mantle communications. New toy. Couldn't sleep? Michael easing George from the elevator car at their level 700 feet down the shaft. Purposely didn't take my medication. Need to be here for our first test, George appreciating Michael's assisting him into the chair at his workstation. How goes the run through on the new computer? All systems check out fine, George. Jesse coming into the large circular steel-walled room. The team did a first-class job. Almost 1,800 hours. I have the doctors on Skype here for you, Jesse, activating one of the large screen monitors mounted above the long bank of smaller ones located at numerous workstations. Looking good, George, Justine encouraging, Judy giving him a wave. Sure, you girls say that to all the old men in your lives, George giving them a small, short wave of his hand, Jesse providing him with his special compound of hydrogen sulfide tablets and other associated ingredients. Accepting a bottle of water, carefully he downs them. The test shot through the Hayward Fault worked out as expected. The energy wave from Japan's quake really helped open it up. The detector registering a full-strength signal at the opposite end in Marin, Judy adding in. Hope we didn't disturb the other George at Industrial Light and Magic, George's own magic elixir quickly taking effect. Now he was raring to go. Seabed. We need to be on station by 0800 tomorrow, BB informing Richard and his team. Give me the coordinates. Like to see it for myself, Richard moving to a large navigational display affixed horizontally, much like a chart table in older subs. The navigator complies upon a nod from BB. Richard notes the crewman's hesitation, but choosing instead to let it go by the wayside. Instantly, a red indicator light illuminates their target location, including its depth. This garners a visible reaction from Richard. What's the matter with the captain? Never been to the deep end of the swimming hole before? BB not able to restrain himself. Richard not taking the bait. Chart indicates a depth of almost 3 miles, some 16,000 feet. What's down there that's so important? 4.8 kilometers to be exact, Captain. Ever hear of the K-129? Gulf II class, Soviet ballistic missile sub, hull 722 if I recall correctly. Been a while since I heard that story. Sank in March of '68. More than a story, BB's tone taking on a decidedly businesslike manner. Although its exact location has been classified secret no foreign, we know where it is. The coordinates are 38 degrees, 5 minutes north, and 178 degrees, 57 minutes east, 600 nautical miles north of Midway Atoll. A little more than 1,600 miles northwest of Hawaii as I see it, Richard running a finger across the screen surface. I'd heard we'd recovered a third of the sub and its nukes using a grappling device aboard Hughes' Glomar Explorer. Brought up the pieces through the ship's moon pool, a CIA op. Not all of them, BB going markedly cool. How many then? Richard looking him straight in the eyes. 2. Arrival. Any ships at sea will not be affected by these tsunamis, Judy reassuring Laura and her mother. They travel at the speed of a jetliner, but passing beneath the ship's hulls. And yes, there will be more than one, due to the magnitude of the first quake and its aftershocks. Buoys indicating onshore flow any minute now, Justine rising from the computer screen, obtaining a better view out of the large picture windows. Got it, Hank observing through his harbor telescope. The leading edge as it builds along the uplifting seabed just north and south of the Golden Gate Bridge itself. It won't crest until it reaches Alcatraz, Angel, and Treasure Islands. Then the waterfronts around the bay itself, Judy adding in. How high will it get? Laura reassuringly holding her mother's shoulders at the windows. At the Berkeley Marina, it will be high enough to overrun the entire city. I expect the Claremont Hotel to disappear as well, the hotel being situated virtually beneath their feet along the base of their Hiller Highlands neighborhood. And Alta Bates Hospital and the university campus as well? Laura hating to be asking. Yes, George answering for the group via Skype. Warnings. BB, the radio man's voice slightly elevated. First wave propagation making landfall at San Francisco. What are the buoys registering wave heights at? Richard snapping into the mix. All aboard had been apprised of this large quake in Japan. I'd estimate 50 feet at the beaches, perhaps 30 or 40 inside the bay itself, BB offering. What about Laura? Jim moving up alongside the radio man and Richard. If they are still at the house, they won't be touched by this, Richard turning toward Jim. And Oakland? Jim thinking of Paul, and Bill, and his other co-workers. Most of it will be wiped out, along with Berkeley and the campus, I'm sorry to say, Richard allowing Jim to take it all in. Can we make contact? Jim leaning in at the radio man. As soon as their computer links with our own, BB releasing this new information to Richard and his team. What sort of computer do you have? Richard for once truly surprised. It's what propels this craft, BB smirk once again returning. And a lot more. Quarters. Captain Anderson, BB waving a hand toward the aft section of Irwin. Let's get you guys bunked in. Thanks, Richard trying his best to keep his emotional dislike in check. He knew George would not bring, what was he, his equal? Would not bring BB into the team unless he trusted this flippant individual. Was he Richard's new senior officer? Or was such a system even relevant? Unlike typical submarines, Irwin was wide open and spacious. Gone was the claustrophobia-inducing confines, squeezing men in and amongst the machine itself. Arranged in a semicircle, not the typical old crew bunks, individual private staterooms were a more apt description, all facing forward towards the sub's bow. You'll find Irwin's motions much different. I think you'll enjoy it, BB leaving Richard's team to select their own quarters. Tossing his small duffel bag through the doorway, Richard shuts it, turning nearly into BB's face. I'd like a complete rundown on the design, construction, and operation of this boat. Not an issue, BB smiling as he moves off across the open semicircular area serving as the crew's lounge and recreation room. Propulsion is the heart of any sub, Richard remaining closely in step. Nano. Moving to Irwin's exact center, the two large men enter a small antechamber, its curved sliding door, hissing as it seals them. Changing room. From here on, it's a sterile, clean room environ. Strip to your skivvies, mate, BB half joking. From their first meeting, both had been sizing up the other, a natural process given their respective backgrounds. Now it was obvious each had seen plenty of combat, judging by their mutual displays of lines, creases, and scars. I'll cut the crap for you, Richard, BB withdrawing for him. A Tyvek, head-to-toe clean suit from a sealed storage compartment. Most of that is for the crew's amusement. Richard lowering his guard. Indeed, he'd misjudged this man. My friend, you are about to step into a new world. I'm confident you've heard of nanotechnology, knowing your background in computers. Yes, and its crossover from computer science into structural engineering. Richard first inserting his bare feet into what amounted to the shoes of the full enclosure suit. I can see why George chose you for this mission, BB impressed. And here I thought you were only a computer programmer. Seriously, engineering is where the world is headed, using diamonds. Inside. With the swish and hiss of a second airlock door, this one more of a hatch in its robust construction, they entered the inner sanctum of Irwin. This is what I consider the heart and mind of our buddy, Irwin. BB standing back a step, allowing Richard full view of the complex arrangement of delicate equipment. Interesting you don't call him she or her as with all other vessels. Richard relaxing, appreciating the sheer audacity of the design. Actually, it was Martha's idea. BB stepping around to the opposite side of the sealed chamber. She christened him. So, this, I take it, is the new computer, Richard following him as they moved clockwise around a clear 6-foot diameter sphere. Actually, 2. Clever George and his team back at the silo managed 2 of these. They were hemispheres, BB stopping at a small flat screen. Never actually saw the guts of the one we took out on Alcatraz, Richard referring to their successful use of George's micro-accelerator spheres to destroy a 512 in the basement of the former island prison in the San Francisco Bay. But I'd seen photographs. This design serves 2 main purposes, with many other associated ones, BB raising his hands at shoulder level above the control panel itself, enabling a holographic display to snap on. Nice. Almost looks solid, Richard appreciating the level of advancement in this technology. Go ahead, grab it, BB moving over, allowing Richard access to the images. Tactile. I like how it feels, real, and moves. Like I'm actually moving the computer parts. Richard displaying a broad smile for the first time since boarding Irwin. The same system is available virtually, and I mean that in the literal sense, anywhere inside or outside the boat. Diamonds. You mean these holographic displays can be projected outside of Irwin? Richard disassembling one of the sample complex computer components like a kid playing with toy wooden blocks. Yes, this one involves tachyons. You'll appreciate this. Much of what I'm going to brief you on, and of course there is much more, following the successful completion of our mission, I'd enjoy delving over a few beers more deeply into it all. A good deal of this began at Harvard's School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. You mean C's, Richard thoroughly enjoying where it was all headed. Yep, BB bringing up a second holographic imaging array. You see, what we're talking about here are diamond nanocrystals and building structures. On what scale? Richard not missing a beat as he digs deeper into the complex heart of Irwin. Macro, Beebe revealing a holographic model of Irwin. We've moved beyond even the so-called 3D printers, my friend. That stopped Richard cold. Using a controlled synthesis of spatially isolated, high-quality micro and nano diamonds, employing a microwave plasma chemical vapor deposition technique, or MPCVD, we can grow from nanoseeds rather than other nucleation techniques and control the final size and density of the crystals. Beebe moving the model from his display over to Richard's, merging the two systems. We can now grow crystals at over 1,000 nanometers per second. Only a few years ago, we barely achieved 22 nanometers a minute. Receiving the model from Beebe, Richard realizing he was actually feeling the weight and heft of the model in his hands, inside the holographic rendition. The microwave power density was found to have the major influence on the crystal morphology, Beebe opening an underwater 3D map of their destination, the Soviet sub K129. Arrival. Withdrawing his hands from inside the holographic imaging system, Richard finds himself holding an actual 12-inch long physical model of Irwin. That is really cool. And don't tell me this is a solid diamond. Did you do that? It is, and no, I think Irwin likes you and wants you to have it for your stateroom. Beebe completely amused at his stumping of this Navy SEAL. What? That causes Richard to take a step back from the computer array. Not in fear, but rather, again, in awe. Is he sentient? To a degree, Irwin is conscious. He does sense his surroundings. I'd liken him to a 2-year-old child in his development. Beebe enlarging the seabed and digital modeling of the K129. You refer to the computer as him and not it, Richard visibly amused. He got that from his mother, Beebe enjoying these revelations to Richard. And who was that? Richard toning down his enthusiasm a little. I told you, George's wife, Martha. Does he feel? Richard reaching over and touching the curved wall of the room. Yes. In fact, the entire boat responds, both inside and out. Beebe expanding the buried section of the K129's hull. Does he hear? Richard not lowering his voice. Yes. Now take a look at our target area on the sub, Beebe having zoomed deeply within the confines of the Cold War era wreckage. How many nukes? Richard already knowing the answer. 2. A third voice emanates from within the chamber. Reconnaissance. Hello, Irwin, Richard openly replies, half expecting the submarine's ability to talk, given it seemed to possess all the other senses. He'd wait to find out if he could actually taste and smell. Hopefully he wouldn't find Irwin to have an appetite. Already he was beginning to feel a bit like Jonah in the whale that swallowed him. Hello, Richard, Irwin replied with the voice of a young man, not that of a child. I can change his voice, but the crew appreciates relating to him as one of their own. Beebe now focusing in upon the detonator section of an old Soviet-era ballistic nuclear missile. And normally he will not speak unless first directed to. Too bad human 2-year-olds can't be controlled like that, Richard leaning in close to view the missile. Oh, but they can, along with the rest of humanity. Now let's get to disarming this bugger, Beebe's demeanor going serious. Wreckage. Evidence of the CIA having been there ahead of them was strewn across the otherwise barren seabed at a depth of 16,000 feet. The crushing pressure registering 6,912 pounds per square inch, or 3.14 metric tons per square inch. Will it take long to dive that deep? Richard exiting Irwin's computer chamber, the door sealing tightly behind them. We've already arrived, BB smirked, returning. But I haven't heard any hull noises with the increases in pressure, Richard pulling up his uniform pants, cinching tightly his belt. The hull, or skin as we refer to it, becomes stronger, actually increasing in its own density the deeper we go. I call it compression reinforcement. As in how diamonds are formed, does the skin consist of nanodiamonds? Again, Richard already suspecting the answer. Exactly. And unlike compression reinforcement with concrete, there is no limit as to the density that can be achieved, and thus its strength. Now, the triggering device. BB displaying the ancient schematics of on a holographic display as it moves in unison along the companionway in front of the two men. Time to get to the bridge. Irwin, bring us alongside the K-129. 100 meters separation. Okay, BB, Irwin replies like any other member of the informal crew. Access. Settling just off the soft bottom, Richard allows for Irwin's disturbance of the fine silt to settle, even with the subtle movements of the hull's wings, not unlike those of an actual stingray or manta ray. Irwin, please play Amazing Grace for our fellow seamen at rest here. Without a reply, a rendition is heard throughout the sub of Scottish Highland bagpipes. Following its conclusion, Richard cannot help but ask, didn't we just give away our position to other subs and sensor buoys? Unlike ordinary subs, all interior sounds are captured. Remember, the hull is too dense. Even at sea level, nothing escapes. And Irwin masks it using a wave-canceling system, just in case. BB taking his seat at the command chair. Please, take a seat, directing Richard to his right. Jim, haven't had a chance to talk much. Take the left seat. Irwin, deploy R1 to the warheads. We are using one of the several ROVs over there. It's unknown what condition the warheads are in after all these years, BB continuing to provide orders to Irwin. External sensors, please. Again in the form of holographic projections, as realistic as the actual ocean outside the sub's hull. All aboard, throughout the boat, in fact, view the little remotely operated vessels. Progress. All stop. Again, BB allowing for the slight disturbances to settle. Using the holograms, we can digitally filter the clouds of biomass constantly raining down from the surface. If you were to view it even through digital cameras, all you'd see is what looks to be snow. The many millions of sea creatures having died off as a result of Fukushima, making it impossible to otherwise conduct this operation. Manipulators at the ready. Move up to the first one, BB orders. One of the P-21, or as designated by NATO, the SSN-5 SARC, nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles. U.S. SOSUS arrays in the North Pacific recorded on 8 March 1968 and triangulated a locus of an acoustic signal, then described as a good-sized bang. Inspection. Moving in close, R1 delicately extends out while grasping a small paintbrush with its mechanical hand, looking all the world like that of an actual human, save for the lack of covering skin. Hidden within its architecture, the power to rip steel apart. Seismic alert, Irwin calm and quietly announces, programmed only to speak of his own volition in such cases. Define in plain speak, BB orders. 8.8 aftershock, epicenter coastline of Fukushima. First shock wave will arrive our location in 5 minutes, 33 seconds, Irwin reports without the usual technical details. Expanding another hologram, the navigator provides the entire crew a view of their immediate surroundings. As you can see, Richard, K129 lays along the open bottom. We do need to be concerned for whatever debris this seismic wave may carry toward us from Japan. There's plenty of it on the bottom between here and there. Not all of what we've seen here is Soviet. Continue R1's inspection, BB orders Irwin. Silently, all aboard watch as the paintbrush removes layers of silt and small sponges, exposing the obvious metallic surface of the first of the two P-21s. What are you looking for? In silence, Jim observing from the left seat alongside BB. Separation bolts. It's not like in the movies. No outside access panel. The triggering device is inside the actual warhead itself. BB at ease in his seat. Can the ROV remove the trigger? Jim continuing, not encountering any resistance to his question. No, it can remove the external bolts along the line of separation from the rocket body itself. The warhead, however, will have to be brought inside. BB expanding for Jim and Richard a view of the missile's nose cone. How much does it weigh? Jim continuing. 2,601 pounds. BB smiling over at him. Impact. I think I missed something here, Jim pressing with his opportunity to dig deeper. Why are we bothering with these old nukes? I thought we were heading straight for the Med. The world ain't flat. The world ain't flat, you know. BB back to his usual smirk and flippant style. No such thing as going straight anywhere on this rock rolling round in space. I think what he means is, Richard interjecting, we need some weapons. You guys never intended for Irwin to be a war machine, right? Richard feeling he's up to speed with BB. Right you are, mate, BB maintaining his upbeat manner. Hang on. Irwin, take us up and over the sub, 200 yards beyond. Smoothly, the Manta's wings gently push off the soft seabed, raising the craft well above the Soviet sub. A swish of its slender tail, and again it settles to the seabed. Impact in 30 seconds, Irwin announces in his calm voice. Seats, BB equally calm. No alarms or flashing lights. All is quiet as they wait out the last remaining seconds. In front of them, another larger holographic display goes live. Richard and Jim see the debris heading straight for them. The first seismically smaller wave disturbing the seabed itself, then obviously moving upward towards the surface, as Irwin snaps the viewer outward, displaying a view as if looking down upon himself from a 45-degree angle. There, Jim reacting to another piece of debris coming into view. This will be fun. BB actually enjoying this show of force. Richard and Jim looking across at each other as if looking through BB seated between them in the command chairs, incredulous. Another much stronger seismic wave impacts Irwin, trying to raise both his hull and the seabed he's resting upon. The freighter, some 300 feet in overall length, is tumbling along its length like a rolling pin, heading straight for them. All three men now transfixed, watching from above, as if within an out-of-body experience. The battered and broken hull, having shed all superstructure, leaving only its flattened decks, rolls to a stop, directly atop Irwin. Thank you, Irwin, BB almost affectionate in his tone. The sub having successfully prevented the freighter's log rolling of the K-129 and its prized cargo. Jim, BB closing down the holographic overview of their present situation. I know you were a medic in your army. Can you suture? Of course, Jim surprised at what he considers an off-the-wall question. Thought so. Care to take over? BB arising from his center position chair, turning to face the younger man. Jim attempting to get to his own feet, BB pushing him back down into the chair. Richard bristles. BB raising his open left palm into Richard's reddening face, as likewise he attempts moving upward from his own chair. No need for hysterics, ladies, BB amused at the display of testosterone. Let's say we three alphas get on our mission, okay? No hard feelings. What the hell are you playing at? Richard again not liking this blowhard Aussie, no matter if George selected him. Lesson time, BB nodding at one of his fellow crew. A hologram, this one a cube measuring out at 3 feet, appears in Jim's lap. Surprised at feeling it having some weight of its own, he can only look up in bewilderment at BB. Go ahead, see what you can make it do. BB to Richard's irritation, maintaining his outstretched palm at him. No one speaks. For all intents and purposes, Jim has resting upon both knees scale models of both Irwin and the sub, gingerly finding both solid to his light touch. Extracting his hands, Jim grasped the 3-foot cube, and like a shadow box display cabinet, he arises from his chair. Moving to the navigation table, he places it near one edge. First things first, I'd say, Jim looking back over at the two head-butting men. I need to get us out from under that ship, leaving the cube resting on the display table. Irwin. Yes, Jim. Can you dig us out? Jim's slightly shaking his head, expecting this to be no big deal for this super sub as he's beginning to regard it. Of course. Barely perceptible to all on board, Irwin ripples the leading edges of his wings. No different than a ray he's meant to replicate, he moves the sands beneath his hull backward. Slowly the sub settles into the seabed, leaving the freighter's hull bridging the gap above Irwin. A gentle swish of his tail moves them forward closer to K-129 and the warheads. Having observed this on the master hologram, Jim is satisfied with their position. Hold here, and thank you, Jim feeling like wanting to shake Irwin's hand, if he had one. You're welcome, Irwin sounding like he is proud of himself. Again, inserting both hands within the cube, Jim takes up Irwin's tail between the index and thumb of his left hand. His right index taps once upon the rear wall of the cube. A more familiar drop-down menu appears, displaying numerous tools. Selecting a pry bar, he grasps it, attaching it to the tip of Irwin's tail. Well done, BB otherwise remaining silent, Richard aware now of what his intent is with Jim. Within the sub's damaged hull, Jim easily views the seam denoting the line of separation between the warhead and the remaining collapsed missile body. Inserting the flattened tip, Jim begins the process of prying the aluminum skin open. Achieving a small hold, he withdraws, backing the tail away, allowing room to switch out the pry bar for a pair of scissors, not unlike those of a surgeon. With these, he is easily able to cut through and nearly around the flattened circumference of the missile body. With the last few remaining inches of aluminum, Jim lets the warhead flex, settling upon the soft sands built up inside the sub's hull. Second one, if you will, BB keeping his distance. Richard, having gained his feet, remains standing alongside. Repeating the operation, finally Jim withdraws both hands from what he now considers his patient of sorts. That was pretty cool, Jim smiling over at BB and Richard, who was visibly has relaxed. Guess my model building days came in handy. Nice, BB handing Jim a bottle of water. Next, my friend, you need to get those pieces aboard. You think that wise? Richard moving in closely to examine the inner workings of the holographic but otherwise solid cube. That's why we're here, mate. Beebe taking a long pull on a bottle of his own. Where are you going to store them? No doubt they're leaking radiation after all these years. Richard looking for some sort of readout, not readily finding one inside the control room. Irwin? Yes, Richard, he replies in a neutral voice. Radiation readings? In summary and in plain English? Richard not wanting a lot of details as he'd expect from a computer. He only gets technical when you ask for specifics. We like things simple too, Beebe offering. Lethal, Irwin replies in what Richard imagines is hinting of Beebe's own flippant mannerism. Nice. So, Richard turning toward Beebe, like I said, you can't bring those things aboard. Or can you? Restraining his voice, expecting Beebe had all this planned out well ahead of time. I'll leave that up to your young medic to figure out, okay? Beebe taking his center position seat at the helm, his back to Jim at the navigation station. Richard is taken aback. Relenting, he gives Jim the go-ahead. Jim smiles, enjoying the challenging puzzle. None of the other crew seem the least bit worried, busying themselves with duties of their own. Selecting from the tool drop-down what appears to be a nylon cargo net, he attaches it to the two manipulator hands at the front of R1, the ROV. Irwin, I want to verbally direct R1. Understood, Jim. Go ahead. Irwin replies in a now friendly tone, as if the two were about to play with a mutual pet dog. Not bothering to look over at Beebe nor Richard, Jim proceeds. Selecting a spoon, he attaches it to the tail end. Carefully, Jim slips the spoon beneath the first warhead, lifting it multiple times, causing the last of the aluminum to fatigue, freeing the weapon of mass destruction. R1, ahead slow, 20 feet, all stop, drop the net, Jim allowing it to free fall away, draping over the entire warhead. R1, descend 5 feet, grasp the net in both hands. The ROV pulling the net closed around the bottom surface of the warhead. Take up the weight. Applying maximum thrusters, the ROV lifts the warhead free of the spoon. Quickly changing out the spoon for a hook, Jim inserts the tail between the R1's manipulator hands, engaging the two ends of the net. R1, release hands and back away slow. The little ROV complies, taking up a hovering position near the warhead, now dangling in the cargo net from the end of Irwin's long mechanical tail. Examining the back surfaces of Irwin, he asks, Irwin, do you have a cargo hold suitable for this radioactive device? Yes, Irwin exhibiting amusement in his voice. Along the unbroken surface of his sloping back, a small opening appears, devoid of any outline of a hatch. The section retreats inside the hull. Thank you, sir, Jim enjoying the surprise, his left hand moving the end of Irwin's tail. I hope you don't mind me using your tail. I never did ask you permission. The warhead smoothly traveling along as Jim first raises the tip, then bending the tail forward, mimicking that of a scorpion. Not at all. I enjoy playing games, Irwin now sounding like the 2-year-old Beebe professed him to be. That cargo hold is lead-lined, as well as being constructed entirely of nanodiamonds, like the rest of this ship. Beebe still not observing anything Jim is engaged in, anticipating the question from Richard. Standing between Jim and Beebe, Richard giving way from his anger, resigning himself to allow this operation to play out. The entire time, the remainder of SEAL Team 7 holds back in silent amusement. Jim repeats the entire operation, finally loading the second warhead inside Irwin. Rising to his feet, Beebe turns to Jim, extending his right hand. Nice. Let's get out of Dodge, using his Aussie cowboy voice, waving to his navigator. You're something of a child prodigy, mate, BB laughing, but noticing Jim's retraction at being called a child. Hold on there. Didn't mean it that way. George told me you were different. He said you'd begin to awaken. BB keeping a wary eye on Richard, knowing how protective he is of Jim. Awaken? Jim not amused at what he feels is an insult. I'm not asleep here, you know. Hold on. Not what I meant, mate. BB moving away from Richard. Both the crew and the SEALs, seeing what was taking place, didn't make a move, rather enjoying the three-ring circus. Stop calling us mate, Richard again feeling his adrenaline rising up in his neck veins and arteries. Hold on, BB laughing between and feeling a little out of breath at the turn of attitudes on both their parts. George told me you have an IQ of 155. About right, but I don't talk about it in the open, Jim looking to Richard, seeing if he was in on this. Good enough, I'd say, BB relaxing his stance. For what? Richard still feeling his open resentment towards this loudmouth. Raising both palms towards Richard and Jim, he takes 2 steps back. Jim, that little operation may not seem like much. Nothing all that complex. But what it did prove is what many would call your use of your intuition. You figured out the controls on that cube. You accepted without comment or question the tactile feel and weights of the holographic objects, and you solved the problem. Again, not complex, but it was a small, simple test. Sorry, Richard, I didn't mean to piss you off. What am I supposed to be awakening to? Jim leaning against the navigation table, having switched off the holographic cube, not paying conscious attention to his own actions in doing so. Do you see it? BB looking over at Richard, whose hands gripped the top of his second-in-command chair. I do, Richard releasing the chair, moving in closer to Jim. Gills. The 2 large men burst out into laughter, each playfully slapping opposite sides of Jim's neck. Jim ducking beneath their arms, spinning away as if from an attack, tossing his open water bottle at them. The crews enjoying the break and the tension. Settling down into their 3 respective chairs, BB begins again, this time in a more solemn tone of voice. Jim, George laid out a series of tests for you to complete prior to our arrival in the Med. What sort of tests? Jim relaxed but nonetheless puzzled, feeling like he's been set up. For good reasons and all, but still uneasy. Like I said, your intuitive skill sets, BB giving a go-ahead hand gesture to the navigator and helmsman. More than one? Jim asks. Yep, and that's what the tests are all about. Finding out how many. Jim's head was beginning to spin, not so much physically as psychologically. He was fully aware and objective as to what was taking place, yet he had no control over any of it. I'm beginning to feel like a lab rat in this diamond can, Jim unsettled in his chair in the command center. What's all this about me awakening? I'll show you, BB opening a solid holographic model of typical 2-strand DNA. Is that mine? Jim running an index finger along sloping ramps. No, BB's voice low, trailing off. What are you saying here? Richard shifting onto his left forearm in his chair. Jim, for the time being, choosing to remain silent. BB brings into view another DNA model, grasping the fully physical representation comprised as the 12-inch one of Irwin presented to Richard was of nanodiamonds. Moving it alongside the first, he pushes the 2 models together. Irwin's computer systems automatically merge them. They are an exact match, save for one unusual feature. Nice trick, But what is this? Richard removing the solid object from the holographic display system hovering in front of BB. As you can see, this model has a third strand of DNA. And yes, Jim, this is yours. BB in a serious matter-of-fact tone. More information, I presume? Jim standing, moving around behind both BB and Richard's chairs. The remaining members of SEAL Team 7 move in close as well. BB shaking his head, breaking his solemn demeanor. Very quick of you. Since when? Jim taking the model as BB offers it over to him. You answer that one. BB rising as well from his chair. Richard follows as Jim backs away holding the model. Jim now encircled by the team, the sub's crew watching from their respective operational stations. Birth, Jim not asking. Yep, BB upbeat and smiling. I've read this in science journals, Richard moving closer alongside Jim, the third strand being comprised of silicon, as in a standard transistor-based computer chip, then coated in a nano-thin layer of gold to increase its surface area, allowing it to store more data than the silicon alone. May I? BB retrieving the small model from Jim's hands. Grasping it from the top and bottom, he begins stretching it, then expanding it until it is too large and heavy to hold. Setting the much larger model upon Irwin's deck, BB continues. That much is true, although as you can see, this one contains no gold, nor for that matter silicon. Outdated, you might say. BB rotating it fully once on the deck. What then does this make me? Jim moving in close, feeling like he's looking internally at himself. The spinning sensation in his head only increasing, but not feeling faint at all. A new man. BB's voice bordering upon his usual tendency toward being flippant. Richard's close proximity, coupled with his demonstrated temper, keeping him in check. Seriously, Jim, that third strand is comprised of live crystals of nanodiamonds. No one spoke. Irwin's crew, fully aware of this technology, had not the need for words. SEAL Team 7 simply stunned into silence. Finally, BB broke the atmosphere, again in all sincerity. To your next question, yes. Sort of makes us related, doesn't it? Jim not sure whether to make a joke of the situation or pass out. You are quick, my friend, BB instinctively relieving Jim's feeling of overwhelming realization with a laugh. Jim, meet Irwin. BB nodding toward one of his crew, seated off to their right. Immediately another hologram appears. A solid, fully rendered human head and shoulders fills the space a few feet ahead of Jim's own. Irwin, nice to meet you. Jim about to laugh, but controlling himself, feeling like he does not want to offend Irwin's caricature of himself. Fully render yourself, please. Jim not missing a beat. Instantly, Irwin presents himself as a complete human body. Instinctively, Jim reaches to shake Irwin's right hand. Likewise, not missing a beat, Irwin shakes Jim's outstretched hand. Hello again, Jim, Irwin replies. Hello, brother. Jim smiling, the spinning sensations having disappeared upon Irwin's complete appearance, coupled with their handshake. I think we can dispense with having an extra body in the way, don't you, Irwin? BB regaining his center command chair. I do. Irwin taking a step away from Jim. You don't mind, do you, Jim? I should have first asked. Irwin's voice as natural and normal as any of the crew. No, not at all. At least now I know who I'm talking to. Jim taking it all in stride. I do have one request, though. Can I call you Steve? If no one objects, Irwin answers, still standing before them. Great idea, Beebe blurts out. Now, we need to haul ass. Reviewing the holographic navigational images directly in front of him. See ya, Steve's own holographic rendering winking out. Retaking his own seat, Jim, still processing all that has just transpired, learning the secrets of his own DNA structure, somehow, however, has not left him feeling scared, or for that matter, alien. I know we have a lot to do here, Jim began. Again, yes, Beebe giving him a fragment of his attention from navigating. George is responsible for you, as with Irwin. I mean Steve. Cool. Jim nodded, all fazed by another revelation. He found the processing of such information not cold and calculating. Rather, all very natural and quite amusing, really. Jim, I'd like you to take over here. Richard and I have to work yet to be done in prepping the warheads. Beebe motioning aft to the rear of Steve, their submarine. Sure, Jim moving over to his right into the center command chair. For Jim, it was not a conscious feeling of confidence as much as it was a case of already knowing what to do and how to do it. Moving toward the aft storage compartment, the openness of the sub's interior impressing upon Richard. He'd spent plenty of time in the cramped passageways and operational sections of the Navy's latest underwater fleet. Reaching the entrance again, he found himself feeling amused. Why the watertight door? I thought Steve became denser the deeper we went. Crew comfort. Old habits are hard to break. Steve, open please. No hitting of the typical electric switch or swinging of a large steel lever or spinning of a locking wheel. Of its own accord, the door swung fully open. They found the warheads sealed in 2 separate containers. Amazing. Diamond? Richard reaching forthrightly over, stroking the surface of the nearest one. The perfect transparency does give it away, doesn't it? Beebe appreciating Richard having finally relaxed. Not much surprises me around here anymore. What's your plan for these? Richard kneeling, gaining a better view of the Cold War relics. Tactically, they're purely a backup measure. Doubt we'll need them. Beebe circling around to the second nuke. Are their triggers still operational? Richard straightening up, looking over their containment vessels. Steve has tested them, yes. Beebe watching for Richard's reaction. Not surprised. How'd he do that? George's little particle accelerators. All it took was a momentary bombardment of the high explosive shape charges and triggers. Beebe, knowing the irony of such a process, would not be lost upon his mutually tenured warrior. Bombing a bomb. Only George could have thought up such a thing. Richard visibly amused. No danger of radiation leak, I take it. Right you are, mate. Diamond's taking care of all that nastiness. Beebe moving toward a wall-mounted holographic display. Well then, if Steve is taking care of all of this for us, why did you bring me all the way back here? Richard moving up alongside. Privacy. None of our crew need to hear this. Beebe rolling over, his back against the curved compartment wall. Steve is not like some kind of HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey, is he? Richard looking back over his right shoulder at the wall-mounted holographic display panel. I mean, have you turned off the microphone in here? Can Steve hear us? Richard feeling quite uncomfortable in the small compartment, knowing it impossible to break out. Steve is hearing and seeing everything. No need to worry. Remember who created him. Beebe actually taking liberty with seeing Richard for once off his game. That's the only difference? A benevolent creator? Richard looking completely around the room, his attention once more drawn to the two nukes laying ominously close at his feet. Yes, not unlike our own, Beebe looking directly at Richard. You mean God? Richard unblinking. Exactly, Beebe likewise in his demeanor. Richard breaking away, beginning to walk between the two nukes and their diamond cases. Did God create Jim? Of course, Beebe following him only with his eyes, his voice even, unraised. Is God responsible for his diamond three-strand DNA as well? Richard's back to Beebe, his head lowered as if examining the end of one of the nukes. All a part of his plan, Beebe unyielding in his demeanor. Really? Richard executing a snappy military about face. And I suppose George had nothing to do with this nano-diamond crap? I mean, come on. Who gave him permission to play God with the kid's DNA? Did anyone bother asking him? Richard's voice bellowing from deep within his diaphragm. It not echoing off the diamond walls, simply dead. Nothing reflecting. Nothing transmitting beyond. You recall from the Bible the lesson of Abraham sacrificing Isaac to God, Beebe moving quickly on. Not to insult you. Of course you do. Richard cuts him off. No way anyone's sacrificing anyone. Not now, not ever. No, not at all. Of course not, Beebe keeping his delivery low and even. God did not, in the end, take Isaac. No, but Abraham came close, Richard's voice moving a notch lower. It was a test of his faith, Beebe looking directly at Richard, standing across the small compartment. You brought me in here to speak of faith, Richard visibly straightening, squaring up his broad, muscular shoulders. Did you? Didn't you? Yes, Beebe remaining in place. Not something to be discussed in front of our crew. Including Jim, Richard still not relaxing his stance. Not a question for him, Beebe taking a few steps to Richard's right, once again stopping and turning toward him. And why not? Richard suddenly feeling insulted by a man he considered at the moment to be all too sanctimonious for his taste. He is not the one who will be tested, Beebe remaining in his place. Who then? Richard's mind racing to the conclusion, the answer self-evident as the words passed from his mind, crossing his lips. I'm Abraham, his voice going low and flat. Not George. Exactly, my friend, Beebe resisting the trite moment of coming closer to Richard in the moment. This was not a warrior needing comforting, only the purpose as to their mission. Why? Richard unmoved, facing the equally large and proven warrior standing opposite himself and two nuclear warheads. Jim is the only man in this world who can accomplish our mission, and George knows you are the only man who can deliver Jim to our objective. The only one he has faith in accomplishing this plan, Beebe being deliberate, not wanting to display any hint of patronizing Richard. Yeah, right. Don't BS me. Richard again pacing around the ends of the nukes. Oh, I'll get us and Jim to our objective all right. I want this as bad as you guys. But I don't plan on offering anyone as a sacrifice, including myself. Got that? I know that, Beebe, still unmoved, only watching and listening. Good, Richard stopped, looking directly at Beebe. Why Jim? What happened to him? How could George do this to him? Richard back to pacing along the far wall. Simple. He is in fact Isaac, Beebe's tone moving upward. Richard again stopped by the statement. Not literally, not biblically, you mean figuratively speaking he is, right? He is a representation of Isaac, yes. BB finally beginning to walk casually about the compartment, occasionally as if studying his own footsteps, but no less important to both George and God. So we're on a mission from God, Richard amused, finding it difficult not to see the dark humor in their conversation. After all, they were discussing as if commonplace to witness the conversion of a young man comprised of diamond DNA going off on a mission to save the world. BB, yes, Steve. BB answering into the otherwise silent darkness of his stateroom. George calling. Voice changing? BB slapping a panel on the curved wall next to his pillow. Purposely dim, a diffused light slowly rises from the room's deck. Afraid so, Captain. No need to be afraid. Happens to all us guys. Pipe him in here for me, okay? Righto, Steve quips in the voice of a 16-year-old. My apologies for the hour. George's familiar voice wafts evenly through the warming atmosphere of BB's quarters. That's okay. What's the latest, my friend? BB swinging his legs, feet finding their way into the well-worn combat boots. These too familiar. This being our first real-world crossing test of the Mantle communication system. Glad to hear you loud and clear. And Steve as well. Don't forget him. These being his sea trials and all, BB stretching his arms, nearly touching the room's ceiling. I like your using his first name, the sound of papers and keyboards emanating from around George. Jim's idea. How are things back at the silo, or should I ask? Waving a hand across the doorway. It slides open with an audible hiss. Why I'm calling. We're all good to go in here, no worries. It's the rest of the world, as you no doubt understand. George waving Michael and Jesse over to his workstation. Then switching the communications link to broadcast throughout the entire complex of the silo for the benefit of the 100 personnel gathered there. There must be a change for you to wake me, BB moving forward through the semicircular crew area to the command center of Steve's bow. Constant, but one of major significance. Pergamon is not their destination. George transmitting their latest satellite imagery of the HMB-1 concealing the 00100 barge through the Earth's mantle. It wasn't really necessary, as George's computer operating Steve had all the world's intelligence services live streaming data into his limitless diamond crystal memory banks. Friend or foe, irrelevant to his acquisition of information, and none could be concealed from his rotating programming models. Given the fact that the entire sub consisted of these very same crystals, functioning as its storage medium, Steve's continuous generation of live nanocrystals resulted in this truly unlimited capacity. Where to then? BB's usual flippant comebacks having seriously waned since his last encounter with Richard. Cyprus. George letting it hit the still groggy sailor soldier. He'd barely managed 3 hours sleep since their rendezvous with the Sea Shadow some 28 hours prior. And the long days and nights preceding the acquisition of SEAL Team 7, having finally caught up to him. Black and hot, BB announcing. Nearly instantaneous, his personal mug and coffee appeared at his command chair, courtesy of a member of his crew. Why? I've my suspicions. We haven't sorted all the possibilities, George's voice hinting at embarrassment. Bet their 2048 couldn't pinpoint why. BB swallowing hard the scalding Kona liquid. If it were on our side, George sounding distracted 700 feet beneath the facade his farmhouse afforded to their silo complex. Is that thing live yet? BB gesturing for a quick refill. As I briefed you guys, not until it's installed on dry land. George's voice coming back at the direction of his personal desk microphone. He dislodged dislike talking out into the open spaces of their control center. Oh yeah, almost awake here, BB appreciating not only the coffee, but his navigator efficiently bringing up 3D images of the island. Go solid and transfer it to the table. Quickly, a solid rendering of Cyprus appears on the table directly behind the 3 command and control chairs. BB rotating his, elevating a few feet above the island model. Let's see what we can see here, shall we, fellas? As several of his crew gather around. What's up, Richard, having been awakened by Jesse from the silo? They enter the command and control center. Resisting anything funny, BB replies, change in destination. They're taking the 2048 to Cyprus. Really? Jim joining them. Yep. BB examining the highest elevations of the topographical model. Pretty cool how they've hidden it and the support equipment inside all those shipping containers aboard that barge. Jim wide awake despite a lack of any type of stimulant. Really had the media guessing while they tied it up at Treasure Island. Well, this ain't no treasure hunt, Richard grumpy, lacking his first intake of coffee. George, what do you make of this? BB elevating another 2 feet, leaving him looking straight down over the model. Richard inwardly amused at the sight of BB's aerial maneuvers. I'd venture to say, most likely a cave, hiding the barge after moving out from inside the HMB-1, George audibly typing at his keyboard. Have to be a big sucker, Richard wiping at an escaping dribble of coffee down his square chin. Nothing like it I know of. BB beginning a slow descent of his chair, eyes following the details of the island's terrain. Tactically speaking, Jim breaking in, moving directly to the model's edge, I'd go for the high ground. Both veteran combat soldiers go silent, looking over at Jim. Agreed, George pipes in. Immediately, BB goes for full elevation of his chair, Richard stretching on his toes, attempting to gain line of sight of the island's highest peak. How are they going to get it there? Too much gear to fly in all at once. A bunch of air missions would draw a lot of attention. Convoy is all Jim offers, pointing to a highway bisecting the island. 00100 running west to east, BB lowering, enabling him to trace it with an outstretched index finger. Stop. Again, is all Jim states. BB's finger comes to rest at the highest point. Of course, George having the benefit of watching every move they made inside their command center, courtesy of Steve. Mount Olympus. Okay, folks, I think that's plenty. That's 2.5 hours. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll pick up the storyline on Mount Olympus. And I thank you for staying with the story this evening. A little different sort of a venture, we might say. A venture. I've just about lost my voice, so I think we'll end here. I thank you again, my friends, for allowing me to make this departure and kind of do something a little bit different. And we will pick this up again tomorrow if you are interested in hearing how this concludes. I think we can probably read without too much introduction as I did today, taking up that time. I think we can probably finish the book tomorrow. So with that, I'll say good evening and God bless.